December 1941. The US has just entered World War II. The very next day, Army troops roll up to Burbank, California. Not to a base, not to a weapons depot, but to Walt Disney Studios. They set up anti-aircraft guns on the roof, barracks in the animator's building, explosives stored where Mickey Mouse cartoons were just drawn. The US military didn't just borrow Disney space, they moved in. At the time, Disney was in trouble. Fantasia and Pinocchio had both flopped at the box office. The European market had vanished as war tore across the continent. Disney was millions in debt, with layoffs, strikes, and rumors the studio might not survive. So when the government came knocking, Walt gracefully opened the door. Because the military didn't just take over his studio, they kept it alive. Within months, Disney was transformed into a wartime propaganda factory. Animators who once drew fairy tales were now sketching blueprints for bombs, tanks, and psychological warfare. Over the next 4 years, Disney produced more than 68 government-commissioned films for the Army, Navy, Treasury, and even the OSS. One cartoon starring Donald Duck, the new spirit, was used to sell war bonds. It was so successful, it raised $50 million in just 13 weeks. That's nearly $900 million today, all thanks to a cartoon duck yelling at Americans to pay their taxes. No one questioned it. The line between animation and propaganda was already gone. They made instructional training reels, wartime health PSAs, and technical manuals, all animated. Need to teach troops how to identify enemy tanks, how to fly a P-38 Lightning, how to avoid syphilis in France. Disney had a cartoon for that. One Disney film, Victory Through Air Power, was so convincing it helped reshape US aerial strategy. FDR watched it, so did Winston Churchill. Soon after, America doubled down on long-range bombing, just as the film suggested. Walt Disney, the cartoonist, was now influencing high-level military doctrine. There was even a Disney bomb, a real one. The Disney Swish, also known as the Disney Bomb, was a British rocket-assisted bunker buster designed to pierce thick German concrete. It dropped from a Lancaster bomber, ignited mid-air, and slammed into German U-boat pens like a cartoon anvil from the sky. It was named after Disney, not because the company built it, but because the weapons engineers thought it hit like something out of a Mickey Mouse short. There were even films for Latin America, colorful musical animations designed to win the hearts of the Southern Hemisphere and keep them from joining the Axis. The US called it hemispheric defense. Disney called it Saludos Amigos. One segment featured Donald Duck getting blackout drunk in Brazil. Officially, this was foreign policy, and after the war, Walt Disney didn't slow down. In the mid-1960s, Walt Disney began acquiring land in Central Florida, covertly. Shell companies, fake names, silent purchases. By the time anyone realized what was happening, he owned over 27,000 acres, twice the size of Manhattan. But buying land wasn't the strange part. The strange part was what happened next. In 1967, Florida granted Disney full governmental control of its territory. It created something called the Reedy Creek Improvement District, a legal anomaly that gave Disney the powers of a city without the structure of one. No elections, no public representation, just Disney, acting as the legislative, executive, and judicial authority. It functioned like a forward operating base, self-contained, self-governed, and built from the ground up with centralized control in mind. Reedy Creek could issue bonds, build roads, create building codes, operate its own fire department and utilities. It even had eminent domain powers, meaning it could legally take your land if it was deemed Disney needed it. And its entire jurisdiction was surrounded by natural buffer zones, water control structures, and limited public access roads, just like a secure installation. This wasn't a city. It was a command zone, disguised as a resort. Everything inside was built to be autonomous, efficient, and sealed off from external influence, just like the facilities Walt had studied during the war. When Magic Kingdom opened in 1971, guests saw a castle, but the real kingdom was underground. Beneath the park is a 9-acre network of tunnels, corridors, and hidden rooms known as utilidors, short for utility corridors. They're invisible from the surface, but that's the point. They weren't just built for convenience, they were built for control. The tunnels manage everything: park surveillance, emergency response, character deployment. At peak operation, over 8,000 people move underground each day, a level of internal routing that mirrors a military base or secured research lab. And the way they were built? Even stranger. Magic Kingdom isn't actually at ground level. The entire park was constructed on the second floor, with the utilidor system beneath it. The real ground is underground. This kind of vertical concealment is common in Cold War bunkers, classified hangars, and subterranean military command centers. But at Disney, it's just called onstage and backstage. Security cameras? Hidden. Air vents? Routed like a submarine. Trash? Shot through underground tubes at 60 miles per hour in a system called AVAC, Automated Vacuum Collection. The same system is used at airports, hospitals, and nuclear sites. And guests don't see the system, but that's just the system working. Every inch of Disney World has been engineered for control, from beneath your feet to the sky above. Because of the underground system reflects the logic of a bunker, the airspace above it mirrors the rules of a base. You can't fly a plane over Disney World. Since 2003, the airspace above the parks has been locked down by the Federal Aviation Administration. 3 miles in every direction, up to 3,000 feet. It's called a temporary flight restriction, or TFR. But this one, it's never been lifted. The restriction was introduced after 9/11, but unlike almost every other TFR in the country, this one never expired. The only other no-fly zones this permanent? The White House, Air Force One, and nuclear facilities. The official reason? Guest safety. But pilots and aviation experts have pointed out there's no comparable restriction over any other major tourist destination. Not the Statue of Liberty, not Mount Rushmore, not even Times Square. Disney's TFR is so unusual, some flight instructors use it to train students on airspace law, as a case study in special privileges. And while Disney was locking down the skies, it kept building strange relationships on the ground. In 1971, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers helped construct Disney's underground infrastructure, specifically water control systems built to military specifications. In 1988, Disney opened an in-park recruiting pavilion for the U.S. Army, a real-life enlistment center just steps away from Space Mountain. And in the 1990s, Disney Imagineers began quietly collaborating with military contractors like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, consulting on simulators, VR training, and logistics models later adopted by defense agencies. You weren't supposed to notice, but while kids were waiting in line for Buzz Lightyear, government recruiters and defense contractors were meeting inside the park. Because by now, Disney wasn't just a place, it was a model for infrastructure, for surveillance, for control, and they were watching everyone. At this point, Disney had become a consistent collaborator with the US military, across decades, industries, and technologies. Disney's elite creative division, WWII Enterprises, later renamed Imagineering, worked with defense contractors on everything from flight simulators to training modules. One Imagineer even helped design the first remote-operated animatronic robot, later adapted into DARPA's Battlefield Robotics program. The US military even began studying theme park ride systems in the 1990s. Why? Because Disney had perfected high-speed, high-fidelity motion simulation, and done it with seamless reliability. Rides like Star Tours and Mission Space were used as reference systems for air combat training pods, tank simulators, virtual reality parachute jumps. But simulation was only one piece of it. What made Disney invaluable to defense agencies wasn't just what it could build on screen, it was how it managed real people in the real world. In the early 2000s, Disney rolled out a new system called MyMagic Plus, a digital wristband for guests that would store tickets, hotel keys, and payment info. They called it a Magic Band, but what it actually did was something else entirely. It turned every visitor into a data point. Each band transmitted real-time data to Disney's central servers. The company could track where you walked, what you bought, how long you waited, and even how often you went into the bathroom. Not just what you did, but how you moved, how you spent, and how you behaved. That data was then used to optimize crowd flow, security protocols, and even employee staffing. And Disney filed patents for even more advanced systems, including facial recognition linked to emotional response, location-based pricing that adapts in real time, predictive behavior modeling based on age, income, and past visits, Some of those patents were later mirrored by Homeland Security and airport surveillance systems. And in some cases, the language was nearly identical. In 2014, a former Disney security consultant confirmed that facial recognition had already been quietly tested at the park gates, not just to monitor threats, but to identify behavioral anomalies. You weren't just being watched, you were being profiled. And if you broke the pattern, someone would notice. Defense agencies, law enforcement, and private contractors saw Disney not as entertainment, but as a real-world prototype for predictive policing and civilian control. And slowly, the systems Disney built for fun began showing up in places that were anything but. Walt Disney once described Epcot as a living blueprint for the future. And he was right, because the real legacy of Disney isn't imagination, it's infrastructure. Infrastructure designed for control. Disney didn't just help the state tell stories, it built the systems the state now studies, in logistics, in influence, in control. We ask ourselves, why does a company have its own government, its own no-fly zone, access to surveillance systems used by the Pentagon, influence over millions of minds, year after year? But deep down, we already know the answer. Because since World War II, Disney has never just been a company. It's been a weapon, built by the US military.